Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show's Weekend Best of Special. We had a busy week this week. My friend Tucker Carlson was here to talk about his new special, Art of the Surge, and why the 2024 election is truly one of the craziest of all time. With the Democratic swap of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris after that debate debacle, plus the incredible realignment we've seen with the Cheneys supporting Harris and a Kennedy supporting Trump. Plus, we got into Kamala's week in the spotlight from her sit down on Fox News, my analysis of her total failure, plus our friends from the Ruthless program. And we talked about her attempt to court black men with National Review's Charlie Cook and MBD. Enjoy and talk to you Monday. You and your Fox EP, Justin Wells, embark on this project in June, and you're not thinking you're going to have the kind of summer that we had. I mean, how could you possibly have been envisioning anything that happened? And yet, you know, you're up close and personal for the most bizarre, compelling, interesting, consequential election in U.S. history, at least one of them, modern history, I think it's fair to say, especially that debate in which Biden collapsed and the assassination attempt, the one where he was shot. I mean, you and Justin had to be behind the scenes like, oh my God. Oh, wow.
Well, it was unbelievable. I mean, I was not there for the debate. I mean, I really wasn't there for much of it at all. But the camera was there. My personal favorite so far, so we've got 3 episodes up. I think I've got 4 and 5 are coming, and it goes to 6. But is the reaction shot backstage during the debate of all the, VIPs who've been accompanying Trump, members of Congress, watching Joe Biden melt down on stage. And these are people who do politics for a living and know Biden personally and are sort of like have what they think is going to happen in mind. And what actually happens is so shocking to them that it's truly unscripted. Like you just can't. They're sitting there with just jaws agape. They can't believe this guy is melting down the way that he is. Yeah. It's really an amazing
We have
moment.
it.
But the whole thing,
let's watch a little bit of that because it is amazing. Like when I watched it and I had the same reaction. Of course, we were all having the same reaction in our homes, but to see Team Trump and others backstage watching it as we did is something else entirely. Watch it. Here it is.
Biden does not sound good right now, so we'll see.
Make sure that it reduces the price of housing to $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they conclude beginning next year. His debt, we'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
OMG.
It's
crazy.
So, if you saw that live, as everyone did, you think, well, is it just me or was that the most profound failure ever captured on film? And then you watch people who do this for a living, Lindsey Graham, Tim Scott, J.D. Vance, Laura Trump. And they're like,
Ben Carson.
They stop. Ben Carson, he stops in mid-bite looking at this. I just love that. And there's a
Laura
lot like
Trump
that. But
speaks for us all when she mouths WTF. Like, it's what we all felt.
I like her. But you said in your open so nicely, it was. But you said this is a year where Kennedy has endorsed Trump and Dick Cheney has endorsed Kamala Harris. I mean, that just kind of sums it up right there. Not just the obvious drama, the meltdown, Biden dropping out, the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, but just the total realignment in the most obvious, undeniable way of American politics, where Bobby Kennedy is on the campaign trail for Donald Trump and Dick Cheney and his daughter are working for Kamala Harris. I mean, who could have predicted that? Nobody.
I know, right. And I mean, what better recommendation for Trump and not for Kamala than to see the world divide in that way. I mean, it is kind of amazing, is it not, Tucker, to see the Cheneys now be lionized by this Democrat Party? And I mean, it's so dishonest. At least she was asked, Kamala was asked, who was it? It was asked about the Liz Cheney endorsement on Meet the Press. Who was it, Steve, who was asked about it? The Liz Cheney endorsement. It was Kristen Welker. But in any event, it's like, she was asking Liz Cheney. That's what it was. She had Liz Cheney just the other day. And she's like, you said a lot of terrible things about Kamala just a few short years ago. People might be left with the impression you're kind of insincere, right? That's not really going to be the takeaway. But does the Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney combo change the calculation here?
Well, I mean, it just puts it into stark relief, as you just said correctly, I think. And it also raises questions for me personally as someone who defended Dick Cheney for, 25 years in public, and always got the sense maybe there's something wrong with Dick Cheney. And why would you be so enthusiastic about shooting down a civilian airliner, as he famously was on 9/11? And, just the cost of these wars in human life was so high. Doesn't that bother you? And I kind of pushed all those thoughts into the back of my mind and didn't deal with them, but they always did bother me on a gut level. And I asked the other night, I was with Russell Brand, who I love, and I said to him, you kind of called this early. What about Dick Cheney made you uncomfortable 20 years ago that I missed? And he just said, he just seemed a bit evil. That's kind of true. And I just felt shame for ignoring that. I mean, it's like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons with Dick Cheney. It's like not a tough call. You don't need to be super spiritually aware to get an evil whiff off Dick Cheney. And I just refuse to see it. And so I just want to apologize for that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how well this is going to do for her. She's got some 9% reportedly of Republican vote, like some sort of share of Republicans is going to go for Kamala Harris. But are these real Republicans? And these are probably the Nicole Wallaces, the Joe Scarboroughs,
sure,
of the world. These are not actual Republicans. I predict, and I think you'll agree with me, notwithstanding the number of Republicans, even that work for Trump, that are now endorsing Kamala, the Republican Party will come home to Trump just as it did in 16 and 20.
I think that's right. I think, certainly Republican voters are foursquare behind Trump. And by the way, they know Trump and they know all of his shortcomings very, very well. They know them really well in the same way you do of your favorite cousin. It doesn't mean you don't love your cousin, but you know exactly who your cousin is. They know who Trump is. They're not deluded. They don't think he's God. But they do think he's the one politician who doesn't hate them. And that's the basis of their requited love for him. But what's interesting is that I think a huge percentage of the Republican leadership in Washington is going to vote for Kamala Harris, whether they say so or not. Mitch McConnell is voting Kamala Harris. There's just no question about it. The Bushes are voting Kamala Harris. Oh, for sure. Are you kidding? Absolutely.
Well, I guess
I bet money on it. Yeah, but I just think there are a lot of Republican senators, for example, whose beliefs are much closer to Kamala Harris's than they are to Trump's or to the Republican electorate.
Well, that's what Liz Cheney was saying when trying to justify herself. I'll play you the soundbite when she went on with Kristen Welker, SOT 73.
Back in 2020, you said Kamala Harris, when she was announced as President Biden's running mate, you called her a radical liberal whose policies, quote, are completely inconsistent with what most Americans believe in and stand for. I know that you don't view this as a policy election. You've been very clear about that. But are there policies that Kamala Harris supports that you also back?
Absolutely. And I would say the extent to which, she and I certainly have had our disagreements. But when you look at the whole range of issues, for example, with respect to support for Ukraine, with respect to the fact that, she is saying that the United States has to lead in the world, Donald Trump is embracing tyrants.
Do you regret any of the language that you used to describe Harris and Biden at the time? They would dismantle our freedom, destroy our history, the type of language you're using now about Donald Trump?
Look, I think certainly those were harsh things that I said. I think that they reflect absolutely that we had a policy disagreement on a series of issues. But I also think that's why it's so important for people to focus on the fact that I am supporting her now.
You nailed it.
Yeah, she doesn't care about any of that stuff. Her behavior on the January 6th commission shows she doesn't care about your freedoms, obviously. She put innocent people, allowed them to go to jail, and suppressed information that was exculpatory. She did that. So she's on Kamala Harris's page with that. The truth is it's about control. That's it. Kamala Harris is a blank slate. She doesn't care. She's policy agnostic. She's what she needs to be. I don't think she's a radical anything other than an opportunist. And everyone in Washington senses that. Can you control her? Of course. Her boss, senile. Can you control him? Yes. Donald Trump, who's not some right-winger, by the way, at all. He's on the moderate side of the spectrum on policy, is not controllable by anybody. And that's either good or bad, depending on your perspective. But if you seek to control politicians, which is what Liz Cheney's business really is, and Dick Cheney's business really is, it's not going to work with Trump. So that's why they hate him. That's why they embraced Kamala. That's why they embraced her boss, Joe Biden, because they're weak. That's the point. They're weak. It is not about an individual issue. Kamala Harris will be whatever she needs to be. I'm not attacking her, by the way. It's a pretty good strategy for advancement. For a low-skilled person to rise to where she has, not easy, and she's done it on the basis of moral flexibility. And Trump just doesn't have that. Like, Trump will make an agreement, you can blackmail Trump, you got to do this, but there's no guarantee that he won't just blurt it out. I remember in the debates in 2016, he gets attacked for knowing Hillary Clinton, and he's like, yeah, well, they actually paid me money to go to her wedding. So I went. He just sort of he breaks the fourth wall. He says the quiet part out loud. That is such a threat to a corrupt system. That's the point. It's not that he's, going to bring fascism or destroy democracy. It's the opposite. He might accidentally tell the truth, and they have to stop him before he does.
Well, you didn't pay taxes. That makes me smart. I'm smart. That was so smart. It wound up in a Dave Chappelle skit honoring him for being, this guy who actually did resonate with people sitting at home. Like, finally, somebody who tells it like it is.
Well, exactly. And if you put enough pressure on Trump, he might intentionally or not just say so. Like, well, Donald Trump, you changed your view on this. Why? Well, because they threatened me. You might say that. Kamala Harris will go to her grave with all of that stuff hidden. And so that's why they like Kamala Harris. And Liz Cheney is telling the truth when she says it's not about policy. It's not about an individual policy. It's about all policies. And, of course, what the Cheneys and permanent Washington really cares about is war, because it's the ultimate exercise of power, killing people, and it's where the money is.
The only thing she mentioned.
So it's the only thing she cares about. Trust me, I know her well. And that's the only thing she cares about. And back when she and her dad and the many like them ran the Republican Party, they dressed it up as we're strong, on defense, or we're keeping the world safe. Well, of course, they've made the world much more chaotic and infinitely more dangerous. We're on the brink of nuclear war right now because of their policies and their, quote, leadership. So it doesn't make anybody safe. It imperils everybody, including our children. And the gig is up for them. They can no longer pretend. People on both sides are sick of pointless forever wars. I do think that's really obvious. People are sick of it. And she's mad that they're sick of it, but,
But this is such an interesting way, and I always learn something talking to you, Tucker. You always give me a different way of thinking about issues, because I've been saying she's a moron, which I do think she's a moron. I stand by that. But when I watch these completely empty sound bites, I think it's because she's dumb and she doesn't know anything and she's incapable of doing anything more. And your words, blank slate, kind of come at it from a different way, that she's intentionally being vague all the time because that's what makes her saleable to her party bosses who have chosen her and who are trying to elevate her to advance their own agenda. In the case of Cheney and so many others, it is wars, the military-industrial complex. And that is a different way of looking at, I'll play the soundbite, we played it a couple days ago, but this one just is so perfect. It just encapsulates everything that I can't stand about how she answers questions. I'm going to look at this with a new pair of eyes, just blank slate as opposed to just utter moron. Let's watch it.
How do we get here? You smell good, you look good.
Oh, that's better than smelling bad. Thank you.
I know. You smell great, you look great. Do you feel great? Kind. It has been a whirlwind for you.
I feel good. Listen, we have 23 days as of today until the election, and I am in these streets traveling and talking with folks. And I'm out here doing the work of earning then the vote so that we can get to the job of continuing to move forward. And for me, that is about pushing for an opportunity economy, which is about tapping into the ambitions and the aspirations of folks. I know the ambitions, the aspirations, the incredible work ethic that exists in our community. I know the dreams that exist, but not everyone has started out on the same base in terms of being able to realize their goals and their dreams. So my plan is to build what I call an opportunity economy, which means giving people an opportunity to actually achieve those ambitions, those goals, and those dreams.
She said nothing.
Yeah. Which isn't easy, by the way. It's not easy to say nothing. It's not easy to be Kamala Harris. It's not easy. Everything about her, from her first name, which she's pronounced various different ways. She doesn't pronounce her own first name consistently, to her accent, which is, of course, an affect. She grew up in Canada. She's Canadian. She went to high school in Montreal, Canada. She didn't grow up in Baltimore. That's a completely fake accent, daughter of college professors. To everything that she believes, which is essentially nothing. And to play that role over so many years with nothing inside is not an easy thing. I don't think she's stupid. I think there are different kinds of intelligence. I think she's a high feral intelligence, an animal intelligence, which is a really useful thing. I wish I had more of it myself. I mean that. But she's just pure ambition, and she'll be what she needs to be. But when I watch that, every time I watch her, I get the same vibe, which is fear. She's afraid. And of course she's afraid because she doesn't believe anything. When you know and you believe what you believe, and if you have limits to what you'll say, to how dishonest you'll be, there's a kind of freedom in that. Like, I'm not going to do that, period. I've already decided. All of us kind of go through this. But there's the rare person, not so rare in politics, unfortunately, she's one of them, who doesn't have any limits at all. And because, whatever it takes, whatever I have to say, whatever I have to pretend to believe, I will. And again, that's a skill. And that's how she leveraged a career with no achievement at all, no obvious skills of any kind, to the place where she could be president of the United States. Try that at home. That's hard. So I do give her credit for that. I think it's been a really difficult, super unpleasant, joyless journey with no real personal relationships, a husband who she kisses with a mask on. Imagine living that life. Seriously. I can't imagine anything worse than that.
That's the least of the problems with the husband. I mean, the husband's got serious issues, which honestly, it's driving me insane.
Can I ask you what you think of that?
Yeah, I believe every word of it.
Of the Emhoff stories? Yeah, I do too.
Yes, first of all, we know that he cheated on the first wife and impregnated the child's nanny. So it's bad enough to cheat on your wife. Then you cheat with the child's nanny. So you're jeopardizing an important relationship in the child's life, right? Presumably, the nanny matters to the child, and you're about to blow up your marriage. So some stability with the caretaker would be nice, but you're screwing that up too because you're screwing the nanny. Then he impregnates her. Then on top of that, the Daily Mail, all of which he's admitted that. Then on top of that, the Daily Mail comes out with a second report saying he bragged to his next girlfriend that he made the nanny sign an NDA and paid her $80,000 to stay quiet because, or at least in connection with this, she lost the baby under circumstances that she blames him for. We don't know exactly what happened, but the Daily Mail reports that there was an emergency at the nanny's home, that EMTs were called, and that it was a serious emergency. And after this, she blames him for losing the baby that he impregnated her with. This is all behind the back of the first wife. So then, in that second report, the Daily Mail reveals, this he hasn't admitted to, that he found a girlfriend in 2012, 18 months before he met Kamala, and they were in Cannes, France at some red carpet black tie event, and for AIDS, to raise money for AIDS research. She's a gunner, this woman. She's a professional, she's a lawyer, she's beautiful. They were dating for a short time. She brings him out there. And that he was so angry, she touched the shoulder of a valet to get his attention so she could get a taxi. He open hand slapped her so hard across the face, she spun. She stumbled. She got into a taxi because now she's scared. He forced his way in. She was so scared of the beating continuing, she called her male friend back in New York to get him on the phone so that he couldn't do anything to her now. She's got an ear witness. That guy spoke to the Daily Mail, as did two of her other friends, at least one of whom was able to give a contemporaneous account of what she was told. The second one came a year later, I think. And this woman broke up with him and provided receipts, obviously that came from the woman. How else would the friends have her airline tickets? And that he denies only through a campaign spokesperson in passive terms. So he's denied it. I believe every word. Because you know what would happen, Tucker. You're a public figure. If somebody came out and said Tucker Carlson beat the girlfriend he had before he married Susie, you would very easily produce said girlfriend to say, this is a vicious lie. I love Tucker. It ended, but we're friends. Or it ended badly, but he never hit me. Where is she? If it didn't happen, and he's had 3 interviews so far, including with MSNBC, which is supposed to be a news organization, no one has asked a question about it.
I don't understand that. How can you not ask about that? I mean, I'm not surprised at all because he's a self-described feminist who's redefining masculinity, and people like that always hate women. It's the beta males you got to watch out for. They will mistreat you. They have no self-respect, and anyone who doesn't respect himself is definitely not going to respect you. That's for certain. They always lash out. I'm a man. I've seen this dynamic a lot. It was always, the peace, love, patchouli guys in college who would rough up their girlfriends. Fact. No, for real. And so it doesn't shock me. What shocks me is that Joe Scarborough could do an interview with him and literally not mention it. I just think there's no kind of depth to their shame either. Like, these are the same people who told us that Biden was a genius, not senile at all, and that it was a cheap fake, the evidence to the contrary, and that all of us were right-wing extremists for suggesting Biden was senile until the day that they all, as one, told us he was in fact senile and had to step down. Like, they're exposed liars. They have no shame.
She had an opportunity to really explain to Fox News viewers how she could help them, and she didn't. Instead, she just kept repeating her same few small ball plans for the economy, which she has all but admitted are just a pipe dream unless the Democrats take complete control of both houses of Congress. You saw she's been asked, like, what if there's a Republican House? What if there's a Republican Senate? How are you going to pay for that? And she told Stephanie Ruhle, well, we just have to. We just have to. What? What if you don't? The question is, what if you don't? And she did no better in addressing that massive problem to all of her plans last night. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Health has been a big topic around the country over the past few weeks. And one thing we don't talk about enough is how exercise plays a vital role in that. And it's not just cardio. We really need to look at strength training. More muscle helps to boost metabolism and helps as we age too, with balance and if you fall and all the stuff. But let's face it, many are intimidated when it comes to lifting weights at a gym, not to mention the fact that we're all busy and we don't necessarily have the time. This is where Jacked Up Fitness comes in. They bring the gym to you, a full machine, and it's cool. It's amazing. It fits in your house and it does it all. It's an all-in-one home gym. It allows you to do multiple strength training exercises, and best of all, it comes with access to their app, which includes multiple workouts, where you just push play and then you follow along. So they basically idiot-proofed it for you. Jacked Up Fitness is an American company, and they are giving 900 machines this year to the Wounded Warrior Project. So if you're looking to take charge of your health and you want to help veterans on their road to recovery too, order your home gym today at getjackedup.com and enter code MK for a 10% discount on your home gym. She spent the majority of her time bashing Trump. That's what obviously this was about for her. She wanted to go on Fox News, into the belly of the beast, and just bashed Donald Trump. It was a one long game of Trump the Piñata with a bunch of attacks that in many cases were utterly baseless. This, Madam Vice President, was the wrong strategy. You should have called me. You should have called me. Because I worked at the place for 13 years, and I know the Fox viewers very well. And you do not win Fox viewers over by bashing Donald Trump. They love Trump, or they're at least open-minded to Trump. You win them, if they're winnable at all, by showing them, the ones who aren't huge Trump fans, but are Republicans or have voted Republican or at least kind of Trump open-minded. You show those people that you are a better option because you can help improve their lives, that they can trust you, and that you aren't as radical as they have been hearing every day, all day on Fox News for a year. You didn't do any of that. None of it. Instead, what Kamala Harris did was she took every opportunity to show the audience she, and really Joe Biden, are the chief sufferers of Trump derangement syndrome. She lied over and over and over on her positions, on her policies. She denied her own record. And the worst sin was, and we saw it over and over, she dodged question after question after question after question after question, and then played the victim, trying to sound indignant when Brett tried to get her back on track. That was the biggest dynamic of the whole interview. Time and time again, she failed to answer the questions. I mean, on big issues. Immigration, whether we should use taxpayer dollars to fund trans surgeries for prisoners and illegals, which is important, but also is a stand-in for the overall issue of trans and the erasure of women. Finally, Brett asked her about Biden's mental acuity. No, she failed to answer that one too. Instead, she filibustered. That was her go-to trick, either with non-responsive pablum, that was her number one choice, or sometimes on another issue entirely. Just get out of bounds, talk about something totally unrelated. And honestly, this is a politician's trick, and it's not unusual to see it. But in response to everything, you're not addressing any substance. What are you doing there? You're trying to win voters in a new forum. Why would you say nothing? The only thing of substance she said was Trump sucks. And that's the wrong strategy when dealing with Fox viewers. Honestly, it was just stupid. I don't get it. And then when Brett would try to redirect her back to the question asked, she acted like he was rude. He's rude. A word her lapdog media sycophants keep repeating today. Let me tell you something about, to those of you morons who think that Brett was rude in trying to get her to answer the question asked. It's not her air. It's Brett's air. It's Rupert's air. But it's in that half an hour exchange, it is Brett Baer's air, not yours. You don't pay to keep the shop open. You don't go out and deal with the advertisers. You don't hire the staff. You don't work with the producers. You don't lay out the lineup. You don't hire the talent. It's his air. His, not yours. You being there is a gift to you. Roger used to tell us, never thank anybody for being on your show. He used to say, don't say thank you for being here. It should go the other way. Thank you for having me. They should be thanking you. You're giving them a massive audience of several million people. I don't know what the ratings will be for last night, but it'll be big. It's your gift to them, and it's your job to control the air when you have a guest on, to keep it interesting for your audience, to keep the car driving straight ahead, and to not let it veer too far off the track. That's your obligation. Brett is employed because Fox believes accurately that he will deduce what his audience wants to have asked and seen discussed. It is not up to her to come hijack the entire interview with empty talking points we've heard 10,000 times. He did absolutely the right thing by redirecting her over and over to the question asked, and on behalf of his audience, pressing her for a real answer. He did nothing wrong. I thought he crushed it, which I posted on Twitter last night. He did a great job. Now, her little act today is being praised by the left as, she looked tough. She was tough. But this was not tough. This was not toughness we saw from her. This was a candidate incapable of answering hard questions over and over, trying to dodge long enough to ideally distract the questioner. And when Brett was not distracted, then she would begin to whine that she wasn't being allowed to answer. That's not tough. Tough is answering the hard questions, which, let's face it, virtually every president, a candidate, can do. Obama could do it. Romney could do it. McCain could do it. Trump can do it when he wants to. When it's one of his favorite issues, he'll go right there. She blew a big chance to define herself in a new way, to say, take the border. Yes, the border is a mess. But look, Brett, I was vice president, not president. I've seen what has happened to people like Jocelyn, the young girl who was 12, who was murdered by an illegal she let in. And I'm totally committed to stopping this. Having had this experience in the number 2 spot has only made me more resolved, should I be elevated, to take care of this problem. And here are the executive orders I will issue on day 1 to do it, irrespective of whether I can get Congress to cooperate with me. That's not what she did. She just dodged. I'll show you the exchanges in a second. Same thing on the economy. She should have said something substantive instead of her myopic little $25,000 for first-time home buyers. You know what a collection of people that is? Not big enough to just make it your platform. She should have said Trump spent us into oblivion. He was like a drunken sailor. He wasn't exactly an economic purse clutcher. Now that I might be in charge, I'll take a more reasonable approach. And we'll fight the debt and we'll fight inflation. And here's exactly how. She doesn't know. She doesn't even understand those 3 plans she's unveiled. She's been given some talking points, which she repeats incessantly, and they're empty. She should have given some points that sounded reasonable to Fox viewers. And she almost did it on the border. She admitted the border's broken, but she took no responsibility. And then she tried to gaslight us into believing she's really Stephen Miller, Trump's border guy. You know what I mean? With it. Fingers in the belt loops, the thumbs in the belt loops. John Wayne, she came out last night with her little routine. I'm the only one who's prosecuted transnational criminal, whatever. Biden's mental acuity, that was another one. Thank God Brett asked about that. That was great. Thank God somebody finally did it. Good for him. But frankly, it was downright embarrassing she didn't have an answer on this. How does she not have an answer on this? She just assumes no one's going to ask her. No one has. I'm like, I'll give you an answer, Kamala, okay? You should really listen to this show more because I could help you, all right? You should have said something like, Brett, what I saw was an older president who had moments of forgetting his words sometimes or his train of thought, but was still entirely capable. That's what my experience was with him. And then came the debate, and as you know, within weeks of that, he resolved not to run for a second term. What else can she say? But what she said in the interview was, Trump. The TDS was like coming out of her ears. That's not responsive to what did you know and when did you know it, which was really his question. So none of this is going to assuage even a single viewer who watches Fox, who thinks you lied, you cooed, and you won't admit it. All right, we're going to go through this more specifically. Let's start with immigration, which is where Brett started. It was the right thing to do. It's her most vulnerable issue. And here's a little montage of how he pressed her.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you
now,
just a number? Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have an immigration system.
It's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
The first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
Good for him.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the... Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising, and I'd like to finish.
With false info.
We recognized from day one that to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem.
And then to Brett's credit, he followed up with, you were in control. Like, you were in control. Why didn't you do it? He said Democrats voted against the bill and so on. So they got into it on immigration, and he didn't let her slide for 1 second. That was a thing of beauty. I don't understand, like, these media writers out there may not know what it's like to be a Republican or an independent or a right-leaning person and how frustrating it is to watch her get away with her lies. It's a soothing balm to watch somebody actually confront her with the real facts. Okay, your stupid amnesty bill in 2021, which you purported to be a tough on the border bill, was a joke from day one. It was your Democrat-controlled House that killed it, and the White House didn't push it. See Politico at the time you tried it. Stop trying to refer to that like it was your day one priority. What you actually did on day one was issue a bunch of executive orders that undid all of Trump's harder border policies, like remain in Mexico, like cracking down on the number of asylum claims, like you reversed the building of the wall and sold off the parts for cash. Like that's what she did. And all she can do is lie now. She recently stumbled upon the fact, oh, gee, we had a 2021 bill that was kind of amnesty with a couple of border enforcement things. I'll just tout that like it's real. It wasn't. The Dems killed it. And then she goes right to her 2024 border effort that, oh, we had Republicans cooperating with us and Trump killed it because he'd rather run on a problem than run on a solution. We've heard that a million times, right? Like that's all she's got. And as for the 3.5 years between those 2 points, she's got nothing. So he presses her in a great way by bringing up some of the families that you guys have seen and heard from on this show, the victims of her policies and Biden's policies, including the mother of little Jocelyn Nugare and her testimony before Congress about what happened to her daughter. Watch.
Jocelyn Nugare, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months south. That we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock, trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur.
So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I'm so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in all fairness, I told you, I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
That is not the same as an apology. It's not. I feel bad. I'm sorry for her loss is not, I'm sorry for being part of what caused it. That's what he was asking. Of course, she didn't answer that. I mean, of course. And I'll give her points for starting off right by showing some empathy for the families. However, the pivot was right to the 9 months since that one stupid mirage of a border bill was tanked. That totally ignores what these parents, these families have been testifying to, which is she opened the border. She and Joe Biden opened the border. And we had 10.4 million illegals come through. And tens of thousands of them turned out to be criminals of one sort or another. And young girls have been murdered, raped, murdered, tortured. So have young men. And he named 3 of them. She took no responsibility. I'm telling you, that shit is not going to fly on Fox News Channel with those viewers. Trust me. Immigration is one of their biggest issues, and her taking no responsibility, none whatsoever, and just trying to shove that fake border bill down their throat. It's a fail. It's a fail. What are you doing there? How is any of that any different from all that you've done in this race so far? Aren't you looking to rejigger things? Aren't you looking to move the needle? That's not the way. That's not going to do it. So once again, she failed to own up to what she and her administration have done. So what'd you think of last night?
Let me start with like two observations before we get into the Kamala stuff, because I think all of us have got thoughts on that. First of all, Bret Baier did an absolutely exceptional job. I mean, he's one of very few, remarkably few journalists, yourself included, that when you get into a situation where you're interviewing a public figure of some significance, that they can actually do their job in a way that journalism is supposed to be done. I think he did an exceptional job. Second of all, what I found so hilarious about the reaction to all of this is the Democrats acting like she just stormed the beaches at Normandy. Right? Yeah. She answered all the questions. It's like, no. Like, that's the job that people are supposed to do who call themselves journalists. And like, Bret is an absolute blue chip journalist. Like, this is what he does. He did the same thing to Donald Trump, by the way, So I understand that they don't watch Fox, so they don't know what actual journalism looks like on Special Report at 6 o'clock, but that's what it is, right?
Or any channel. I guess it's not available, but it's been so long, and by that I mean never, that Kamala Harris has had a challenging interview since she became the nominee. They don't even understand it when they see it. It's like the dog with the They don't, instead of being like, oh, journalism, they're like, I'll give you a sampling, guys. Here is a little bit of the media meltdown in response to that interview.
We witnessed a man who spent his life as a down-the-middle journalist, seeming to throw it all away for his audience of one, interrupting the vice president awkwardly and unnecessarily.
I thought she handled it masterfully. I mean, he was rude.
I think Bret Baier was rude. So was it a home run? No. Did she need it to be a home run? Absolutely not.
And I was quite repulsed by Bret Baier. The attack mode from the beginning was quite stunning.
Vice President Kamala Harris kicks Bret Baier's ass. It was an extraordinary performance from the vice president in hostile territory. And frankly, Bret Baier should leave, quit the job, and go to a monastery and hope to atone.
Hello.
Yeah, the lib media reaction is exactly what I was waiting for this morning after I saw it last night. I mean, every morning when I get up, I like to say today is going to be an insane day. And what I saw this morning out of the left-wing media just did not disappoint.
No. And it's a huge missed opportunity. I mean, take it out of the partisan lens. And, Democrats for weeks have been begging Kamala Harris's campaign to distance herself from President Biden. And she refused to do that. And Bret Baier gave her numerous opportunities. He was like, look, 80% of this country thinks we're on the wrong track. Is there anything you would have done differently in the last 3.5 years? And she can't. He asked her, okay, what's going to be different about your administration than Joe Biden? The best she could do is, well, I will be a different person. It'll be a different person will be taking the oath.
A new generation of leadership.
Unbelievable.
So what, like you're younger?
You would think on Fox News, if they had a strategy as a presidential campaign to make that pivot, to make distance between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, do it on Fox. You've got people willing to hear that message that are independent, that are conservative leaning. And like you had a huge opportunity. That's what is blowing my mind about this, is it was a huge opportunity for Kamala Harris to finally make that pivot, and she didn't.
But she ain't got it. That's the problem. She just doesn't have another gear. Like, this is, for whatever you saw of Kamala Harris, and I think it was an abject disaster for her, for all the reasons that you pointed out in your monologue at the top. She doesn't have, that's as good as you're going to get. Like, it doesn't get any better for her than that. I mean, imagine you spend the last 2 weeks not being able to answer the simple question of what you would do differently, and then you get a shot to redo it, and you still haven't come up with anything. Like, sooner or later, you're just like, well, I guess it's all we got. Kamala Harris and it's not Donald Trump,
Oh, well. So I will add this. I also thought she was whiny. Like that business about against the American people. She's got to be aware she has a terrible voice. As Maureen Callahan describes it, it's vocal fry adjacent. It's too much. It's a lot. And there's a clip online on Twitter where it has a split screen of her with like the angry, scolding look, and Bret Baier as follows, with the eyes closed. It's like, and they were like, there isn't a man alive who can't relate to this. She's a lot. And I teed up just a little sampling of what I am referring to. Watch.
May I please finish?
Yes,
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish.
You,
I'm
and
in
they
the
didn't
middle
bring up
of
that
responding to the point you're raising,
Okay.
and I'd like to finish. Turning the
Pollsters.
page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than
people are
70% of people
exhausted. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within. Talking about the American people. Well, that's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you.
That was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that.
You say now
he's
unstable.
Unstable? He is unstable, Brett. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism.
All right. Now, my take on that, guys, is like that the young gals might be looking for like a girl boss moment. She's already got them because they want abortions. She needs to get men. And you tell me what man is out there like, I want to spend more time with that.
I mean, so I believe it was actually Roger Ailes who would point out that if you watch people on mute just for the body language, it's extremely telling of what's happening there. And I actually, after I'd watched it, I muted it. It was much more enjoyable with her on mute. But just looking at her body language, the last 30 seconds for me were just completely critical. She was back in her chair, arms folded, just giving off as much hostility as physically possible a person can convey. That whole interview, she basically came off as being someone who is angry, combative, extremely unlikable. And she's not serving herself any favors with male voters, with female voters, with any voting bloc, except for the left, who has found themselves in a position where they want to be gaslit, where they want to say, oh, she won the day. Yes, I am happy she does not want to answer any questions for me. Brett Baier, it's sad that the state of being a great journalist is asking questions the average American would want to know. At what point did you notice Joe Biden had cognitive decline? When, months earlier,
she hasn't been.
I've not been asked that.
I mean, that thing was
until 2 weeks before the election?
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Wow. Great contrast. One of the things that makes Brett so good at this gig is that he exudes his comfortability, right? And at one point she was just trying to talk over him the whole time. And he's like, I think we're just talking over each other. I apologize. Here's what I'm trying to ask. It's this disarming way. As a viewer, you watch it and you're like, oh, he's got total control of this situation. Meanwhile, you look at her and it's like, it's just combative.
All right. I've got to read you this, Holmes. So first of all, I do want to say I'm going to read you this quote because it plays right off of what you're saying, but the opposite view. Brett revealed after the interview that they got there late. They were supposed to tape between 5 and 5:30. His show starts at 6. And when you're doing what's called an as live, where you're doing an interview that's pre-taped and you're just going to run it as was, without edits, it does take some time to ingest it into the system and to turn it. Like you can't be doing that interview up till 5:58 and make air at 6. Trust me, we've been in this position many times on many shows I've done. And so it was important that it go from 5 to 5:30, as she agreed to do. He revealed after the fact she didn't show up until 5:15 and sat down, fine, he was a pro. He started taping it with her. And that 25 minutes in, instead of 30, her team was giving him the hard rap. He said 4 of her staffers were behind her like, rap, which explains why he was like, he even said it in the interview, like, I'm getting the hard rap here, which is so weird because it must have been over the top. Because if you've got staffers telling you a hard rap is necessary, but the candidate is speaking and going on, she's supposed to be the boss. Like she should be in charge. If she wants it to go on, it's going to go on. I wouldn't be listening to the staffers. So they were in a panic because they knew it wasn't going well. And they really tried to F him, which, by the way, did increase the time pressure on Brett. He knew he had to get through these subjects and to stop the talking points and the non sequiturs. And he did a great job of it. But here's what I wanted to read you. There's a lot of crazy media reaction, but this guy stood out to me. He works for Deadline. His name is Dominic Patton. And it's just so over the top. Having been roasted online by the MAGA base in anticipation of softball questions, quote, real journalist, as the VP called him at one point. You're already wrong, Dominic. She called him a serious journalist. So already you fucked up your facts. Brett barely let the VP get a word in during the opening part of the sit down, as Bear played largely to the MAGA base and his core viewership. The veteran anchor appeared largely out of his depth, challenged on his questions and wanting to flex his own muscles. Bear ended up fumbling his line of questioning and losing control of the interview to the well-prepped VP as he got caught up in centering over and over on culture war issues and Joe Biden's mental acuity.
Oh my God.
Well, Megyn, when I want analysis on depth, the first place I usually turn is Deadline.
Same.
And I tell you how many opportunities I've had to go to Deadline and just find out what is really going on behind the scenes. You don't know until you read Deadline. One of the things that was interesting to me about the four staffers waving their hands in the background is what subject they were covering when they did it. She was getting very weak on Iran, and they lost their mind. Yeah. We can't let her keep talking about Iran because we have Iran sympathists who are working for us, and so we can't mess that up.
They're watching Michigan poll numbers tick down.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
And complaining that Brett was interrupting her. Well, you got to make some clarifying points during an answer in which, they all start with, we really got to go back to the signing of the Treaty of Versailles before we talk about the border crisis. She was clearly stalling for time because she didn't want to have to answer the question. I mean, it was Brett who had to name check the bill she was referencing that would, quote, secure the border.
The U.S. Citizenship Act?
Right, which is an amnesty bill.
Like a border security bill.
And then she talks about, in the last 9 months, we could have passed a bill that would have strengthened all these things. And yes, he has to clarify, that doesn't help Laken Riley because the illegal immigrant that murdered her got in 2022.
Yeah.
And it's that's the job of a journalist. I know that's uncomfortable for them that she got asked real questions, but it's nice that finally.
Well, they don't know it. I mean, that's the thing that's so blatantly obvious about it. First of all, the fever swamp that the Deadline guy lives in. You'd like to take a look at that and get the hell out as fast as possible. But they're so unaccustomed to any sort of real pushing or questioning. I mean, look, this lady's been the nominee of the Democratic Party since mid-July. Nobody's ever asked her. I mean, the fact that she's on stage in the first place is because of the mental decline, obviously, of her boss.
Right.
And that's why he got off the ticket and she's on it. That's not an imperative question to be asked. That's the first time anybody's ever said, hey, Kamala, did you ever notice that the guy couldn't complete a sentence?
Right.
The rest of the media can't do it because they were in on it. This is the first person she has sat with who wasn't in on it and therefore had no qualms about saying, he's been in decline for a long time and you've been vouching for him. Let me read you something on the interruptions. I mean, this is, first of all, David Plouffe, who's, I think, running her campaign, tweeted out right after it was over, Kamala Harris, strong. Now you tell me, when you have to tell the people, she was strong. You don't really see Donald Trump's people tweeting out, Donald Trump, strong. We know. Kamala Harris, strong, handled an ambush Fox interview light years better than the hash Donald Trump, unstable, made of the Fox pep rally disguised as a town hall. So it was an ambush, according to him. Claire McCaskill. Brett Baer was downright rude and disrespectful. She's strong. She's strong. She tweeted. Dan Pfeiffer, who's part of that Pod Save America, right? Brett Baer likes to dress up as a journalist, but he is as committed to the larger Fox News project as Hannity or Pirro. Listen to this. Harris handled that Fox News interview with confidence and skill. Now try to imagine Donald Trump handling tough, antagonistic questions. You got to be kidding me.
It's crazy. 3 months ago, they were all saying, no, Joe Biden's a mental giant behind the scenes. Just trust us. Today, they're saying, oh, Kamala was really strong. She killed it.
Yeah.
And
well, then, okay.
I don't get why people like Plouffe and Pfeiffer are humiliating themselves. They've already made so much money. Like the Pod Save guys got in trouble with their employees going on strike because their houses are an architectural digest. Like you don't have to humiliate yourself like this. You're already loaded.
So Smug, maybe we're being too hard. Maybe they just really don't like interruptions, like Claire McCaskill, all these MSNBCers. Maybe they really don't like interruptions, as we heard on MSNBC, we heard on CNN. Oh, wait. Here's a little montage to remind you.
The biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign. They spied on my campaign.
There's no real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
No.
It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir,
they spied on my campaign and they got caught.
Can I say something? You know, this is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't put on things we can't verify.
Leslie, they spied on my campaign.
Well, we can't verify
It's been totally verified.
You haven't asked about inflation.
No, I'm sorry. Let's stick to this. I know.
The American people want us to talk about how to make their lives better. They don't want us to.
Why won't you say that?
The Unselect Committee destroyed all the evidence.
They say they. I want to know about your perspective, Mr. President.
Listen,
I want to
they
ask
put out
about
an announcement that
I agree. You don't want to talk about policy.
No,
Dana,
what I
which is
want to
why
talk
you're talking
about. What
other
I want to talk
distractions
about
instead of about the fact
Senator,
that Kamala
it was
Harris,
your
Dana,
distraction.
granted amnesty.
You were the
at a
one who
mass
started
level. She
talking about
granted
eating
amnesty
dogs
at a
and
mass.
this is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one where I have a hostile judge.
We have you for a limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different
No,
topics.
excuse you. You're the one that held me up for 35 minutes.
You absolutely could re-engage folks into the American labor market. This is, I think,
to work in construction.
Of course, you could.
I mean, the unemployment rate is 4.1%. Most people who
unemployment rate, Lulu. This is important.
But most people who don't work can't work in the regular economy.
Oh. Maybe they are okay, depending on who's across from the journalist at issue.
Yeah, I mean, partisanship's a hell of a drug. The problem is that, you know, there aren't any Walter Cronkites roaming around those mainstream corporate media outfits anymore. I mean, they just don't have them.
She says exactly the same thing everywhere she goes. It's not a policy. It's just some amorphous goal that she's using to try to make herself sound like Barack Obama, but failing. Take a listen to Sat 2.
How do we get here? You smell good, you look good.
Oh, that's better than smelling bad. Thank you.
I know. You smell great, you look great. Do you feel great? Kind. It has been a whirlwind for you.
I feel good. You know, listen, we have 23 days as of today until the election, and I am in these streets traveling and talking with folks, and I am out here doing the work of earning then the vote so that we can get to the job of continuing to move forward. And for me, that is about pushing for an opportunity economy, which is about tapping into the ambitions and the aspirations of folks.
Oh, God.
I know.
Stop it.
The ambitions, the aspirations, the incredible work ethic that exists in our community. I know the dreams that exist, but not everyone has started out on the same base in terms of being able to realize their goals and their dreams. So my plan is to build what I call an opportunity economy, which means giving people an opportunity to actually achieve those ambitions, those goals, and those dreams.
Oh my God, Charlie, I can't. Charlie, even my intellect cannot handle it. And I can't imagine what it is like for someone with your big brain. By the way, I just need to correct myself. The podcast is called The Shade Room. I misread a quote about what she says in it for the name of the podcast, which I confess I've never heard of. But what do you make of that stirring message?
What I make of it is that she can't think. See, I think, as I've said before, that people mistake what's going on here. They think she's not eloquent, or that she's nervous, or that she's just unused to speaking in public. But I think what we just saw was another example of how she just doesn't have anything in her head. She hasn't ever contrived a worldview. She doesn't have any ideological moorings. She's never thought about policy. The description of the economy she says she wants to build never gets beyond that. I mean, you're right to point out that she uses the same three words, but she's been tweeting recently, and that's why I have a plan. But she never says what it is. There's no second tweet. There's no link to anything else. Now, I understand that politics is about more than white papers. I understand you have to talk in generalities to some extent, show where you stand and for whom you stand. But there are very few politicians who limit their entire verbal output to cliches. They do at some point get into the details. And she just can't do it. I mean, a good example of this was in her interview with Stephanie Rule, Hardly a Hardball, sit down where she said, we need to make the rich pay their fair share. Now, that's a stump line. That's a cliche that has been uttered by Joe Biden and Barack Obama before her. And then Stephanie Ruhle said to her, well, what happens if Congress is run by Republicans and they refuse to raise the taxes you want? And she said 3 times, well, we have to. And then she said, and that's it. That's not an argument. That's not a position. There is nothing to that. That is just absolute fluff. I don't believe there is anything more to Kamala Harris than you just saw. And I think your listeners by this point should know I'm fair-minded enough to accept when that is not true. Look, I had a lot of problems with Barack Obama. I really did not like Barack Obama. We could talk for days about why I didn't like Barack Obama. But obviously the man is smart, and obviously the man had thought about what he believed and what he wanted to do. Bill Clinton before him, even more so. Bill Clinton, by all accounts, was somebody who could answer the second question and the third question and the fourth question, who really was interested in policy as the governor of Arkansas and then as president of the United States. Harris has never shown in anything that she has done before or after this candidacy that she has any knowledge whatsoever beyond the first point. She just repeats these phrases and then moves on. And I don't think there's anything there.
I think you're being too hard on her. Listen to her in Scottsdale, Arizona, speaking specifically to what is at stake in this election.
So when we think about what's at stake in this election, whoa, it's packed with some stuff. It's packed with some fundamental stuff. I say rather articulately.
Oh my God. Charlie, do you want to take it all back? You feel bad now, right? I've proven you wrong.
The laugh is a giveaway too. She knows. She knows at one level that she's got nothing there.
She knows what we know. MBD, because I have to, I must show you and the audience. They know, but it bears reinforcing. She only has a couple of tricks. That's it. She's got a few tricks and she trots them out. And she tries each time to say it like it's the first time she's saying it, but there's nothing else there. It'd be one thing if these were sprinkled amidst more substantive policy prescriptions, but here she was sitting down with Roland Martin in SOT 1. Take a listen.
Why do you want this? Why do you want to be president? There's somebody who's saying, why should I trust her with the power of being commander-in-chief?
I love our country, Roland.
Oh,
I believe in the American people. And I know we are a people who have the character, that have ambition, that have aspirations, dreams.
I can't.
And I intend to be a president who meets people with opportunities for them to not just get by, but get ahead.
No. It's what she calls an opportunity economy, MBD. That's what she came up with this clever phrase. My team doesn't show me all these before the show. They just tell me about them in the packet, and I see them as you guys see them. I really don't know how much more of this I can handle.
It's ludicrous that this person is running for president.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's an improvement on Joe Biden fundamentally. She's
be honest.
She's not really that more cogent than he is. She doesn't, produces that many more sentences than he does. And it's actually even worse when you really look at it, because not only is it substanceless, and she's trying to run this vibes campaign where you just fill in the blank. Like, oh, there's some stuff in this election, and you fill it in. But she's trying to run on this, oh, I'm a positive, fresh face for the future. But she's doing it with all these cliches. I'm in the streets. I'm doing the work. Now, compare that, to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump will go on stage, and he's like, it's like the difference between a nervous person on a date, that's Kamala Harris, and then, a pro like Trump with the opposite sex. Kamala says like, oh, I like you so much. Oh, that's really interesting. Trump comes to Detroit and says something like, I could be on one of my beaches. I could be on one of my golf resorts, but I'm here in Detroit because I want to save the country or something like that. And he's literally teasing them. Like, I don't really want to be here. Maybe Michigan, I kind of think it's kind of a dump in some ways. And they love him for it, right? It just shows so much more social intelligence and relatability than what Kamala is doing. What Kamala is doing is just, it looks like she's trying to survive the moment. Like she's constantly reaching for the life raft to pull her into the boat with each question.
It's so true. You're uncomfortable watching it.
Right. And that fundamentally you don't look at that performance in an interview, a low pressure interview with someone who's sympathetic to you. And you don't look at that performance and say, oh, that's what I want in an executive, which is what the president is. You look at Trump and he's just joking around with you. He's teasing, kind of negging the audience. He'll say something like, we're real conservative. Maybe we're a little liberal too, and just laugh. And he has that confidence. So, I think that's fundamentally why she is sinking in the polls. I mean, people don't want another, blank card in the White House. There's a way in which, the ticket the Democrats have put forward is sort of a fake, right? It's sort of like Joe Biden was kind of Barack Obama's affirmative action candidate for vice president. Like, okay, I need to fill out a white guy on my ticket to reassure people. And then Biden specifically casts Kamala Harris as a kind of affirmative action hire. Like, okay, I need a black woman on my ticket. And then she does the same thing to Tim Walz. Like, I need another affirmative action. So you get this feeling that they're just empty representations on the face of a progressive blob that does its own thinking. And that they're not really even in charge of themselves. And if they're not in charge of themselves, why would you elect them to be in charge of the country?
Yeah, who's in charge? I mean, we think maybe Jake Sullivan. But speaking of foreign policy, here's another thing. She not only can she not think, Charlie, I completely agree with that, but she knows nothing. She knows nothing. Yeah. She memorized, I think, note cards on various subjects to be able to handle that debate. And if she wasn't primed for that debate on a subject, she's out. She's got nothing. We saw this in the 60 Minutes interview. As everybody knows, they did not release the transcript. So we don't know exactly what was taken out of the interview, but they did put some portion of the outtakes on what's called 60 Minutes Extra, which is the online property. Well, they'll show you some overtime, Amy, which is like they'll show you their next favorite collection of exchanges that didn't quite make the cut. And in that, they aired some more foreign policy questions. Like they asked her about China and Taiwan. And she said, I'm not going to answer hypotheticals, as though this were a deposition. And, she had been trained to not give anything more to her cross-examiner than was necessary, as opposed to a job interview with us where we're actually entitled to know how she sees that issue, which is really important. And then she gets to Iran and she does it again. Watch this. This is from the 60 interview.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
So if you have proof that Iran is building a nuclear weapon, would you take military action?
I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals at this moment.
Okay. Will you take military action? I'm not going to talk hypotheticals. Then, by the time we got to this past Friday, 3 days ago, she was on a call with Jewish voters. This issue came up again. Clearly, she'd been primed. Clearly, she doesn't have an aversion to answering hypotheticals. She just didn't know when Bill Whitaker asked her what to say. And then at some point, her team got to her, and here's how she handled it on Friday.
Make no mistake, as president, I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend American forces and interests from Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. And I will never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Diplomacy is my preferred path to that end, but all options are on the table.
You tell me, Charlie. I think she was reading. She's
reading. She's an actress. She's an actress. It's creepy. You could just as easily imagine her saying the opposite words. And that is just not true of her opponent, who has many of his own flaws and doesn't do the reading either. You know, I have long defended, much to the groans of many conservatives, many of the career politicians that we have present in our system and have had historically. You know, it's easy to gripe about career politicians. And when you mean people who believe in nothing and just go along with it for the pension, I completely agree. But there are some great career politicians. Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan. These people were in office a long time. They were interested in politics a long time. And one of the reasons that it can be so useful to be a career politician, that dreaded thing, is because over time, if you have a genuine interest in politics, then you build up a genuine set of beliefs about the world. I always, when asked how I got into politics, will tell people I didn't know anything till 9/11. That was the moment when I thought I should learn some things about the world. I was completely blissfully ignorant. I was 16 years old when that happened, and I thought I need to develop some theories about the world because I had just lived in this sort of 80s, 90s, end of history period, and it was great. And since then, and I'm not running for president, don't worry, but since then, I have, just because I work in politics and I'm interested in politics, and you end up listening to people who are interested in and interesting about politics, develop certain theories about the law and about taxes and about foreign policy and about the relationship between the federal government and the states and so on and so forth. This is something that happens naturally if you spend time in this arena. Well, Harris has been in politics in one way or another now for more than 20 years, and she genuinely does not seem to have any interest or information or education about almost anything. And those examples you gave were great because what they show is she had been briefed probably about Iran most recently because it is currently in the news in relation to Israel. So she had that on her tongue. So she was asked, well, which is the worst country? And she said, well, it's got to be Iran, because that was the last one she'd heard. But she hadn't thought about the next bit, which is, well, would you do anything about Iran if it tried to get a nuclear weapon? So the next time that the topic comes up, she makes sure that she's been told that particular piece of information. She's developed or had written out for her an answer on that. But again, if you said to her a follow-up, and I don't know what that would be because I'm not an expert in this area, but if you said a follow-up, well, how would you strike them? In which region would you strike them? What about their backup facility in, make up the city here? I don't think she'd have an answer, because I really do think that her interest and knowledge in this is limited to, as Michael said, the exact moment. The purpose at any given point for Harris is to get through the interview or get through the fundraiser or get through the speech. There's no long-term thinking. She doesn't have aspirations. She doesn't have goals. She doesn't have a vision of the United States in 2030 or 2040. Yeah. And, you know, that really matters to me. And I'll finish by saying this. I am a huge critic of Trump's in many, many ways. But the one thing that is weird about Trump is, although I disagree with a lot of the views that he has held since the 1980s, he actually does have a vision of the United States. He knows what he thinks the problem is. He knows by whom he thinks we are getting screwed. He knows which rules he thinks ought to change. He knows which people he thinks have been left behind. Now, I will argue against him on this until I'm blue in the face when I disagree with him. But he did enter politics with more than just the aspiration of getting elected. And I wonder if he does win in November, whether that's going to ultimately be the difference.
She doesn't know the answer, MBD, unless it's been written out for her and she's reading it in a prompter or like on that call in which she was not on cam, or it was on one of those note cards.